Well, Sarah, thank you so much for being here with me on the Entrepreneurial Success Podcast. I'm thrilled to bits to have you here. Today's episode is a little bit different from the original episodes that I have available for the audience, but I think it is so important of what we're going to discuss today. Before we get started, why don't I hand over to you so you can introduce yourself to the audience?
Oh, thank you. Well, it's lovely to be here and I was so pleased to be invited. This is my first podcast. So my name's Sara Wilcox and I am the founder and CEO of a charity called Pathways Through Dementia. The charity specialises in supporting people navigating legal and financial issues around dementia. So we run a helpline service and we do talks and training for people on topics such as paying for care, managing other people's money through lasting powers of attorney or deputyship orders and the work of the Court of Protection. And then we talk to people a lot about the Mental Capacity Act, the community care laws that will govern their dementia journey, including the Care Act, and occasionally talking to people about welfare benefits.
And this is why I'm so passionate about the fact that I have you here with us, because I think, it is something that people don't really talk about and some people are not even aware of it. And then when people are faced with certain situations where they have to look after somebody who's got dementia, they don't even know where to turn for help. And that's why I'm so passionate and so intrigued to hear what you're saying and what you're sharing here with us today, because I think it's really going to be beneficial to a lot of people in the audience. They might even, if it doesn't affect them, they might even know of somebody who it affects, and then they can get some support and advice from you. But before we go into that, tell me a little bit about how you got started. How did you go into this charity and how did that evolve to where you are now?
Sure. So I have had relatives with dementia, and as you just said quite rightly, even if you haven't got direct experience of dementia, pretty much everybody knows somebody who's got or has had dementia. So I have had relatives with dementia in my family. My maternal grandmother had dementia and quite young, and my paternal grandfather also had dementia. So he died when I was 11 of Alzheimer's disease, and he died at home, whereas my grandmother died in a home when I was in my 20s. So I grew up with two good is probably the wrong word, but two interesting experiences of dementia that were very different. So I realised quite young that when you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia, because everybody's journey is so unique and different. So I didn't consciously go into the world of dementia because it was in my family, but what happened was when we moved to London in 2001, I worked at the Court of Protection. So I was dealing with deputyship orders there, and I learned a lot around paying for care and abuse of vulnerable adults, what you can and can't do with other people's money. Then I went to Ealing and worked as an advocate for a very small dementia charity in Ealing. And then I ended up at the Alzheimer Society for 7.5 years, and I was their legal and welfare officer, so I ran a legal helpline. And that was when the Mental Capacity Act was going through. So I was training solicitors, health professionals, talking at carers groups about the Mental Capacity Act, which is a very important piece of legislation that a lot of people don't know about. And then when I left Alzheimer Society to have a baby in 2011, they actually closed the legal helpline that I ran there. So I thought that was a bit of a shame, because it was very helpful to people. And so I built up this kind of body of knowledge and expertise around dementia and the law. And I thought, well, I'll start my own charity and open the helpline and run it as Pathways Through Dementia. And so we registered as a charity in 2013, and we take hundreds of calls every year, train Admiral nurses, give talks to various different audiences, just educating people around what they need to know when they're making decisions on behalf of someone else. It's very important though, Henriette, for me to point out that we don't offer advice. We're not insured. So it's an information-based service whereby we give people options around what they can do. We don't tell people what they should do.
No, that's really clear. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it is so interesting when I hear people's stories about something that has happened in their life that has made them kind of like make a decision to go in a certain direction. And it's interesting to hear that from your aspect as well, that what you've been through, what you've experienced, and how that's kind of shaped you and formed you, where you now running your own charity. And I think it is so amazing to see that there's women like yourself who are just so passionate about what you do. by helping other people, and particularly people who are either struggling with dementia or people who knows about others who are struggling with it. So one of the things that I want to ask you is, can we talk a little bit about dementia in particular? Can we talk a little bit and just explain to people, most people know what it is, but let's just zone in on that a little bit just to get some clarity around dementia.
Okay, so that's one of the common questions that we get is, what's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease? So dementia is an umbrella term for different kinds of memory problems that people can have. So it's a bit like if you said to someone, I've got cancer, they say, oh, what kind of cancer have you got? If you said, I've got dementia, people would say, oh, what kind of dementia have you got? And the reason most people have heard of Alzheimer's disease is because it's the most common form of dementia. It's also the only kind of dementia for which there is medication available. So then you've got other kinds of dementia like vascular dementia, which is when people are having small strokes in the brain that affects their short-term memory. Korsakoff's type dementia, which is alcohol related. And then you've got the rarer types, such as Lewy body dementia, which can cause hallucinations and quite challenging behavioural problems. And then the type of dementia that Terry Pratchett had. So his type of dementia is called PCA, and it is a type of dementia that actually affects your writing ability, and that's why he picked it up so early, was because he was a writer. If he'd have had a different kind of job, he may not have realised that his short-term memory was being so adversely affected by something serious that was occurring in his brain. So basically, dementia affects short-term memory first. So this is when families look back on the start of dementia, they'll say, oh yes, you know, a few years ago, this person, they would ask you a question, and then 2 minutes later, they're asking you the same question. So that can be a sign that somebody may be developing short-term memory loss, but the long-term memories can stay for a long time. And sometimes people then are living in that long-term memory. So they think, oh, this isn't my house, because they've forgotten that this is their house. They think they're living in another house, or they think that they're still working. I've met people who are in their 80s who think that their children are at home waiting for them to cook their tea, you know. So these are the kinds of issues that arise with problems with your short-term memory.
And I find it very interesting because I'm obviously not somebody who's very much aware of dementia myself. So for me, just hearing what you're saying, it just opens up so many channels and so many questions as well. So for me, who's not literally affected by it or who doesn't know anybody, thankfully, who suffers from it, but I'm sure by the audience listening to this, they would just go, oh my gosh, I've got so many more questions. But I think one of the things is even though, you know, we all know that dementia is a sad thing, but it can happen to anybody. I mean, is it something that is, you know, passed through generations? Is it something that can just occur to anybody? How does that normally happen? How does that occur?
So they don't really know is the answer to that question. And in a sense, that's one of the major challenges with finding a cure for dementia, is the fact that we don't know why some people develop it and some people don't. When I worked in Ealing, there was a family of 12 children and all of the women had it and none of the men.
Oh, wow.
So, but there isn't, as far as I'm aware, they haven't proven a genetic link, although they do say that if your mother has it, you are more likely to get it. But the major risk with dementia is age. So basically, the older you are, the more likely you are to develop some form of dementia. So that's why the post-war generation, we've seen so much dementia, because that generation, it seems, were very fit and healthy physically. And so we've seen, as we see the mortality rate dwindle in older people, so people are living longer basically, the more people that are living longer, the more people in society will have dementia. That's a direct link.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about the work that you do then, because I do know that you offer support to workers, carers in particular. Talk to us a little bit about that kind of work that you do, because I find that very interesting.
Yeah, so in actual fact, it was really a lady called Vos Kells who worked in a large corporate company in Victoria when I was at the Alzheimer's Society, who was really the reason that I started this charity in many ways, because she contacted the Alzheimer's Society and happened to come through to me on the general helpline. And she said, I want someone to come and do a talk at my offices for my staff. And I thought, gosh, that's a really interesting idea. And I went and I did the talk. That must have been in around 2003, 4. And it always stayed with me. And I thought, gosh, what an innovative HR manager to have thought to do this for her staff. And it was very well attended, and people came. It ran for 2 hours. They asked lots and lots of questions. And yes, it just stuck with me, really. So one of the reasons that I started Pathways was really to build on that experience. And I really wanted to go out into businesses to talk to working carers. Also because my mother had given up work for a couple of years to look after my grandmother when I was a teenager. So I saw the direct impact that this caring role creates, really, on all families. It could be women or men. And so really I wanted to support what's called the sandwich generation, which is people like me and you who are working, potentially raising a family and trying to look after elderly relatives with dementia at the same time. So that's one of the channels that we've always tried to explore with Pathways. It's very difficult to get businesses interested in this concept. Obviously, they don't know me. It's an unusual idea to have somebody going into somebody's office and deliver a talk, but we are doing it online at the moment, so people can join our online seminars. So that's one strand of our work. And we also obviously, back that up with running the helpline service. So if people had a question afterwards, then they can always come back to me and we can support them in an ongoing way.
Yeah, and I find it fascinating, and I think that's part of the reason why I absolutely love the idea of you coming onto the podcast, because I think there needs to be a lot more awareness brought to, the kind of work that you're doing, but also awareness brought to everybody else in the population and in the world. It's like anything else, if there's no awareness, people wouldn't do anything about it. But I think the more awareness is brought to this particular topic, the more people realize that there are ways to get support, but also know that there are options available for what they can do and what they can do to support those loved ones, or, even the ones that they're not in direct relation with, so to speak. And that's nice, because, the more awareness there is in the world of everything, the more people can do to support and help each other.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit more about your charity. Tell us a little bit more about what you do then, apart from what you've just said.
Yes. So, we do try and raise awareness of dementia. I think on that note, the fact that there is less of a stigma around dementia has meant that famous people have come out and spoken about it. And in a way, they are amazing advocates, because people feel, well, if Barbara Windsor can come out and talk about it, then I can talk about it. So we do raise awareness, but really at the moment, our main focus is the helpline, because obviously we've been in lockdown since March. We can't go out and do our talks and training as we used to. I have done a couple of talks online. But it's really the bulk of the work is the helpline. So we receive, in January, we received nearly 100 inquiries in 1 month.
Wow.
I'm not quite sure why that was. That was a huge rise in the usual numbers. We probably get between 30 and 40 inquiries a month. And people are interested in paying for care rules. So I still talk to people who think that because their partner's going into a care home, they're going to have to sell their house, which is not true. People don't know where to find the rules, so I can guide them as to where these rules are. And we also talk to people a lot around mental capacity, because people can set up lasting power of attorney forms or sign wills even when they have dementia, whereas a number of people amongst the public, they think, oh, if someone's got dementia, how could they make this decision? How could they sign these documents? Whereas in actual fact, as long as people are adequately supported with their dementia, then they can carry on making decisions for quite a long time, if not forever, during their illness. So we try and teach people about what the law says about their situation. So paying for care, lasting powers of attorney, the alternative to lasting powers of attorney, which are deputyship orders, we talk to people a lot about. And then we get a lot of inquiries around what are essentially family dynamics, really, which are the more tricky kinds of calls, because what people really want is for someone in their family to change their behaviour towards the person with dementia, and I have no influence over that. So unfortunately, dementia does expose historical family difficulties a lot of the time. And then if you throw money into the mix as well, so people are managing other people's money and other people are suspicious about what they're doing with that money, can create a lot of tension in families, where I think really people could do with some kind of mediation kind of service, which we can also offer in terms of talking to people about what's in the best interest of the person with dementia, not about who likes who or who did what to who 5 years ago or who's the favourite child or any of that. You need to get rid of all that kind of detritus around the decision-making process and put the person with dementia at the heart of where we're going. So that's another service that we offer, because I've got a diploma in group facilitation and conflict resolution. So we do a bit of work around that as well, because that is a really, really difficult part of dementia, is when families are struggling to work together because they haven't had to work on this kind of problem together and they're not very good at it, you know, which all of us struggle with conflict within our families. That's a very natural part of life.
Yeah, and I think that's so helpful, because that was going to be my other question, is how are the families affected? Because, you know, just looking at an example, if there's an elderly person who's affected by dementia and the whole family finds out about it now, how are they affected? And do they go through, you know, they've obviously have so many questions as well. But then I think that comes back down to how are they supported as well in order to make the right decisions together. So I think you just nailed it on the head there, just saying that you can offer that support and obviously to help them with decision makings. I find it really interesting because, like I said, me as a novice coming up, talking to you about this, having no idea, and I'm being very honest about it, having no idea about dementia and about the kind of work that you're doing, I find it really fascinating. And I just find that deep down in my heart, I just feel I need to do a little bit more in order to support you in that way. But for the audience listening here, is there anything that they can do to support a charity like yourself, in order to maybe spread the word or do anything in particular in order to help people with dementia?
That's a really good question. I think, so obviously you and I met through Athena Network, and we had a really good talk at Athena Network the other day about your ideal kind of client or your ideal collaboration with somebody. And I suppose really the people that we're looking to reach out to are people like HR managers. So HR managers of large organisations where they will have quite a large number of carers amongst their workforce that they're possibly not aware of. So there used to be this really interesting website with this calculator on it called the Hidden Tiger Calculator. It doesn't exist now, I'm not sure why, but what you could do is, as a company, you could put in the number of employees that you had, and then the Sleeping Tiger calculator would calculate how many of those employees were carers, because 1 in 7 people in the workforce are carers. Now, not necessarily for people with dementia, but a large number of them will be for people with dementia. So that was a really interesting way for HR managers to assess the need that there might be in their organisation for supporting these people. And then anecdotally working alongside other organisations that are also operating in the same kind of arena that I operate in, they have found that people often don't talk at work about their caring responsibilities. There is still a stigma around dementia. Some people don't want to talk about it. And yet, when there was a lady who put together a support group at her work, and people came along to this lunchtime support group and they were saying, I didn't know you were caring for someone with dementia. I didn't know you were caring for someone. And they've been working alongside each other for years. And yet they've never talked about the problems that their parents were struggling with memory loss. So I think it is very hidden. It is a sleeping tiger and it's out there. And in the workplace, are people talking about it enough? Are people being supported enough with the right information? Because one of the passions that I have as well is really around planning ahead for dementia. So what can you do now that will make your life easier in the future? So drawing up lasting power of attorney forms, making advanced decisions, talking to your family about what kinds of treatments or medical interventions you might or might not want at the end of your life. At what point might you want to go into a care home? What kind of quality of, all these things that people don't really talk about. I'm quite interested in getting people talking about those things and thinking about those things, and then kind of structuring a plan to accommodate what the future may hold for them. Yeah. Quite difficult to get people engaged in those conversations, because people like to think, oh, hopefully I won't have to care for somebody with dementia, or hopefully the dementia won't get much worse, so I don't need to have this conversation. But really, we should all be having these conversations quite early on in our lives.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think it's like anything, if we look at any mental illness, mental health, any of those kind of things, it's very much, people don't understand it, so they kind of fear it in a way, and they don't talk about it. And because it's maybe not something that is in their forefront, so they just feel that it's got nothing to do with them, so why bother? But I think, like I said earlier on, the more awareness that is being brought to it, the more people would understand it, and the more people would actually really think, this is something that I needed to look into, not just maybe for myself, but also for those around you, for the loved ones you have. Talk to us a little bit about the online seminars that you have available, because I know people in the audience, they thinking now of what we're just saying, and they're thinking, okay, that is something that I maybe need to look into myself. And I think the first point of call would possibly be to go to one of your online seminars where you talk about it in a little bit more detail. So tell us about those.
Okay, so this is really new to us, because obviously we always did face-to-face. So I'd travel up and down the country going to different groups and visiting different audiences to talk about dementia and the law. So it's only been recently that myself and the trustees have realised, we don't know how long the situation is going to go on for, so let's go online. So our first seminar is on the 11th of November, and that is for working carers. So the idea really is that employers will pay for their staff to come onto our seminar. You can only have a maximum of 7 people, because people will ask a lot of questions, and so you don't want to have a number of questions that you can't answer because you haven't got the time. So it's only 7 people, and it's just for an hour and 15 minutes, and it's structured around paying for care and managing money, but with plenty of opportunity for people to ask their own questions, and as we did at the beginning, a bit of an overview of dementia and just dementia generally. So that's the first kind of seminar that we're starting to run, but we'll be rolling out various kinds of different talks and workshops for people. So that one is specifically for employees, but we'll probably start setting up talks for carers who want to pay for themselves to come onto the seminar. We may do some lasting power of attorney workshops online, because we used to do those face-to-face. So we're kind of thinking about various offers that we can put out there for people, and at a reasonable price, so that we can, as many people as possible can access this service. But obviously, at the moment, as a charity, as with all charities, we are struggling financially, and so we have had to make this a paid-for service. So that's what we're planning at the moment.
Yeah, and that's completely understandable, because it's like anything, you're paying for information, and as a charity, it just makes more sense in order to support you as a charity in that way as well. So if I was in that situation, I'd be happily paying you for that information and coming and joining you for any of your online seminars. So for those of you listening, I know, like I said, this episode is going to be a little bit different than the original episode you get. But like I said, I wholeheartedly support Sara with her charity and what she's doing. And I just think it is so important to get the word out there. So this might affect you directly or indirectly in a way. You might know of somebody who is a carer, somebody else is struggling with dementia. So it might just be a good thing for you to go and just find out, maybe get in contact with Sara, work through her charity in order to just learn a little bit more about what options you have and what kind of support you can get as well in order to help somebody else or help yourself if you're directly affected by dementia. So Sara, I just wanted to say thank you so much. I know this has been a very short episode, but I think the content and what you've said here today really would resonate with so many people in the audience. And I really want to get this out there in order to make sure that people can really resonate with it, but also spread the word, because that is the foundation of any awareness being brought on to dementia. But thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Is there any last tips, any last things that you would like to give to the audience or share with them?
No, just our website address is www.pathwaysthroughdementia.org.uk, and our helpline number is 0203 405 5940. Because I also work for Age UK Richmond part-time, I'm hardly ever here to answer the phone, so people need to leave a message with their number and I will get back to them.
Amazing. And what we'll do is all of those details, including the website, will be below, available in my show notes. So by all means, go and get in contact with Sarah, and she would love to chat with you as well. Sarah, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time here with me.
Oh, it's lovely.
Amazing. We'll be in touch very soon again.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.